What's going on, guys? It's your boy Nick coming at you on the channel today with an update to UMI Control post Magnificent Mavens. This is a deck that I brought to the channel before as a 500 subscriber special, and back then we were running some of the Legendary Fisherman support, but we decided that post Mavens, in order to make the deck very consistent and just as pushed as we possibly can get it, we decided to cut all the quote-unquote fluff out of it and just make the deck a pure control deck. And what I like a lot about UMI Control specifically is the fact that it just doesn't let your opponent play the game. You have amazing cards like Ocean Dragonlord Kairyu-Shin here, who pretty much just floodgate your opponent out of the duel, unless they're on a water-focused strategy specifically. If they're not, they're having a very bad time. And we decided to update this deck. Like I said, Mavens just came out, which is where we got these beautiful, for the first time ever, ultra rare printings of a legendary ocean. Look how amazing these look. I just want to... The fact that this card has been out for literally almost 10 years and hasn't had a holo printing yet is a shame, because this card deserved it for the longest time. But with that being said, guys, we are going to jump head first and dive, pun intended, right into the legendary ocean. And for those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. My name's Nick. We do live duel videos, deck profiles, discussions, and all different kinds of rogue decks. If those are things that you like and you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe. I guarantee you there's a profile somewhere on my channel that you will absolutely love. So smash that subscribe button, like the video, and comment down below on how much you love Legendary Ocean and how badass you think this profile is. So with that being said, we are going to start with the monsters, of course, per usual. And leading things off here, we are on triple copies of the Warrior of Atlantis. This is pretty much 3 more copies of a Legendary Ocean. Pretty straightforward. This card can discard itself to add a Legendary Ocean from deck to hand. That effect isn't even once per turn, which is also pretty cool. But just giving more access to Legendary Ocean, which is treated as UMI, is extremely important in this deck. For obvious reasons. Then, moving on, we're on triple copies of Electric Jellyfish. This is brand new out of the most recent Legendary Duelist set, Fury from the Deep, I believe is what it was called, or Legendary Duelist 9, for those of you who are not in America. Electric Jellyfish, amazing brand new card for UMI support. It serves as a pseudo extender by allowing you to send an UMI from your hand or deck to grave to special summon any water monster from your hand. This lets you special summon any water monster from your hand in the entire game. And on top of that, if you control UMI, keep in mind the Legendary Ocean is treated as such always. While you control UMI, this card becomes a monster negate and a spell negate. Without even having a cost. As long as you control a Legendary Ocean, whenever your opponent activates a spell card or monster effect, you can negate it. And if you do, this card can gain 600 attack, which is a permanent attack buff. And it just stacks. So the more he negates, the bigger he gets. Very insane card. Obviously, you play it at 3 just because it's a negate and it's a pseudo extender. But speaking of extenders or starters, we also have triple copies of Ice Knight. Can't explain how amazingly powerful this card actually is. Ice Knight gives you the ability to normal summon a second time. That is incredible. Like, having the double summon effect in the form of a monster is really, really strong, because not only can he just summon additional cards to help enable Xyz plays or Link plays, but if you don't control UMI for some reason, you play a lot of level 5s in the deck, you can actually still normal summon them by attributing the Ice Knight as cost, using his secondary effect, which is just really, really awesome. So, triple copies of Ice Knight. Also, as a side note, Ice Knight can get pretty big because he does gain 400 attack for each Aqua monster you control, including himself. And since this deck does play a lot of Aqua monsters, Ice Knight can crest the 22 to 2400 attack benchmark very, very easily, depending on the board state. So, for a normal summon, it's extremely strong. But moving on to the heart and soul of the deck, triple copies of Ocean Dragonlord Kairyu-Shin. You see the bad boy right here on the sleeve. Don't let the teeth bite you. He is one of the greatest UMI supports I've ever seen. He's a retrain of the original Kairyu-Shin boss that Mako Tsunami used to have. So very, very good retrain on their part, being able to retrain such an iconic monster from the original DM era of Yu-Gi-Oh! What Ocean Dragonlord Kairyu-Shin does is he has a continuous effect that just applies while he's on the board and while Umi's on field. And what that effect is that while Umi's on the field, each player can only control one face-up non-water monster. If a player controls 2 or more, they must send some to the grave so that they only control 1. Effectively, what this card is there can be only 1, but on legs. So as long as he has an UMI on field, this card is preventing your opponent from controlling more than 1 non-water, which is what I said earlier in the profile about how if you're not on a water-focused strategy, you're having a very terrible time because this card is just preventing you from establishing any kind of field presence. Not only that, even if you establish a field presence and this card gets summoned, you don't have a chance to respond to that effect because it's not an activated effect. It's just a continuous effect that applies while he's on field. So what happened is if you have a board full of like dark monsters, for example, and you get the chance to put this on field while you have UMI out, immediately, once the summon of this card is successful, your opponent has to send everything they control so that they only control 1. And they don't get a chance to respond with anything until after they do that, which is nuts. But as if that wasn't bad enough, this card has a secondary effect where once per turn during your main phase, you can add from the deck to your hand 1 UMI or a Kairushin spell trap or a Sea Stealth spell trap from the deck to your hand. So he lets you search basically the entire archetype. Very, very strong card. Also, keep in mind, the Legendary Ocean dumbs the levels down of everything by 1 for water monsters in your hand and in the field, so these cards become level 4 while you control a Legendary Ocean. So you can just normal summon it without tribute, which is really, really insane. Following that up, we have 2 copies of Silent Sea Nettle, just a very good water extender. Basically, if you control a water monster, you get to special summon this card from your hand, and then you can't special summon monsters except water monsters the turn you activate this effect, but that literally doesn't matter because everything that we're running happens to be a water for the most part. But just a free extender, always want to be able to put more bodies on board to make additional extra deck plays. And not only that, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target up to 3 water monsters in your grave, shuffle them into the deck. That doesn't always come up, but in a grind game it actually can, because not only can he shuffle back extra deck or main deck resources, he can also shuffle back extra deck resources as well. Even though you don't really shuffle them, you just put them back in deck. But he still has the opportunity to do that, so 2 copies of Sea Nettle is a really good extender. Then around 1 copy of Yugioh of the Aqua. This is a brand new card out of Darkwing Blast. She's also a retrain of another monster, I believe called Maiden of the Aqua. If I'm not mistaken, she used to be, while she was on the field and you didn't control a field spell, the field was treated as UMI. Very cool card, but kind of power crept at this point, so this is a new iteration of her. And what she does is she can target a water monster in your graveyard and apply one of the following effects. But also you can't special summon for the rest of the turn except waters. Again, that doesn't bother us. You can either, only if Umi's on the field, you can target a monster that has a level, and until the end phase, her level and this card's name become that monster's name. That effect doesn't really come up unless you're trying to make an Xyz play, for example, but the real draw of this card is the fact that her secondary effect allows you to target a water engrave and special summon it in defense position. She doesn't even negate the effects of the water that you summon, so that's really, really strong. And if that wasn't bad enough, you can banish this card from grave to target an UMI in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So it just gives you even more recursion for your field spell, which is very important to this deck. So overall, a really strong card. Then we have 1 copy of Coderus. A lot of you guys probably haven't seen this card in a very long time because it's so old. Coderus is a very deceptively strong card. And the reason for that is because you get to send an UMI you control to the graveyard as cost, and if it resolves, you can target up to 2 cards the opponent controls, send those targets to the graveyard. So by sending an UMI you control to grave, you can target 2 cards they control and send them. So it's targeted removal, but non-destruction. You just target and send any 2 cards they control, and that effect is not once per turn. So if you have multiple UMIs, for example, there's certain cards that we play in the spells and traps that treat themselves as UMI, you can actually send those cards as cost for this, to send 2 cards, and then if you have the actual UMI on field, or a Legendary Ocean, since it's treated as such, you can send that and also send an additional 2 more cards from their field to grave. So Coderus is really strong at just being able to like remove threats without destroying them, you know, preventing them from triggering like floating effects and other things of that nature. Then around 1 copy of General Wayne of the Ice Barrier is a very nice tech choice. It is a level 5 monster, which will become level 4 under a Legendary Ocean. But when this card is normal or special summoned, you can search for an Ice Barrier spell trap from deck to hand, and you will see what spell trap we are actually running. It's kind of crazy. But not only that, while this card's on the field, any spell and trap sent to your opponent's graveyard gets banished instead. Very strong floodgate for decks that need their spells and traps engraved. I'm thinking decks like Sky Striker, Eldritch, There's probably a few more that I'm drawing blanks on, but for the most part, very strong card. So we play this in the deck as a one-of. Keep in mind it is a warrior that comes up actually later in the profile. One copy of Mega Fortress Whale. This is brand new out of the legendary duelist set. This card is a retrain of the ritual monster Fortress Whale way back in the day. Very cool retrain though. Pretty much, if Umi's on the field, you can activate this effect. Your water monsters can attack directly this turn. I don't know why he has that effect, but basically all waters you control can attack directly, so why not? Additionally, during your opponent's battle phase, quick effect, you can target a face-up monster they control and destroy it if Umi's on the field. And then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can either add to your hand or special summon a water warrior monster from your deck or graveyard. Keep in mind, General Wayne of the Ice Barrier was a warrior, so if your opponent outs the Mega Fortress Whale, you can either add General Wayne to your hand from the graveyard or deck, or special summon it from the graveyard or deck. So very cool synergy there. So just one copy of Mega Fortress Whale is all you need. And then of course, we are on the one copy of the original OG Kairu Shin. This is Mako Tsunami's original boss monster. And we play it in the deck as a one-of because we actually can special summon it off one of the spell cards we actually run. So it gives us a bit of utility as a nice extender. And it's just really awesome. I mean, we have the playmat here, why not play the original card itself? So one copy of the original Kairu Shin. But now moving into the spells. Triple copies of a Legendary Ocean. One of the coolest field spells ever printed. This card's name is always treated as Umi. And then all water monsters on the field gain 200 attack and defense, and then also reduce the levels of all water monsters in both players' hands and on the field by 1. That might not seem impactful, the fact that it reduces water monsters but on both players' fields, but that comes up against matchups that actually run like water-focused strategies. I'm thinking decks like Goaty, for example. By dumbing their levels down by 1, screws up all of their synchro plays. Thinking decks like Sword Soul. Like Moyi is a water. All of the Sword Soul tokens are water. So all their levels are dumbed down by 1, which makes it so that they can't make the synchros that they usually want to make. So that's a really cool floodgate, which, you know, a lot of people tend to overlook. Then triple copies of Fish Sonar. This is the spell card I was telling you that has synergy with the vanilla Kairu Shin we run, because this is brand new again out of the Legendary Duelist set. This card allows you to add a level 7 or lower water monster from the deck to your hand that either mentions Umi in its text or that is a water normal monster. So this lets you search any card from deck to hand that mentions Umi in its text, and there's a whole bunch of them that do. Or you can search for a level 7 or lower water normal monster. However, if you control Umi, then you can also special summon a water normal monster from your deck. So usually we're using this card to search things like Electric Jellyfish. We're using it to search things like your Ocean Dragon Lord Kairu Shin. We can also use it to search stuff like Kodoris and or the Yoshiro the Aqua from deck to hand. And then if we do that, and we control Umi, we get to special the vanilla Kairu Shin from deck for pretty much free. So triple copies of Sonar, one of the greatest fish supports I've ever read. And then of course, because sometimes we don't always win the die roll, we got to main deck the triple copies of Dark Ruler No More. If your opponent thinks they're going to get off scot-free by going first and setting up a board, well, we're going to Dark Ruler them, activate an Ocean, and then normal summon Kairu Shin, and they have to send their whole board to grave and they can't say anything about it. Then for consistency, we're on 2 copies of Pot of Extravagance just for the draw power in the deck. We chose not to run 3 just because I don't want a situation where we draw pot off of a pot. I think having the 2 pots is a really good ratio. The deck is at 41 cards, so it's very concise. 1 copy of Fury of Kairu Shin. This is just a searcher for Torrential Tribute, which is really badass. And as an additional benefit, you can banish this from grave to protect one of your water monsters or several of them that would attempt to be destroyed by a card effect. That is not an activated effect either. Think of it like Dingirsu when he detaches to protect. You can do the same. So if your water monsters would be threatened by some kind of removal, you can banish this to protect them. Or even if you activate your own copy of Torrential, you can banish this to protect your side of the board while still nuking theirs, which is really cool. Also, this is a Kairu Shin spell trap. Keep in mind the Ocean Dragon Lord Kairu Shin can search this. Then we're on 1 copy of Sea Stealth 2. This is a continuous spell. This card's name becomes Umi while it's on the field or in the graveyard. So this is an additional copy of Umi pretty much, but has a bit of a different effect. Pretty much your opponent cannot target water monsters you control with non-water monster effects. So that's pretty cool. So that prevents your cards from getting like Effect Veiler, because Effect Veiler is not a water, she's a light, or any other targeting effects that you guys can think of in the meta right now. or even in Rogue, there's tons of monsters that tap into target, and if this is on the board, their non-waters can't target your waters, which is pretty cool. And then additionally, at the start of the battle phase, you can special summon from your hand or graveyard one monster that mentions Umi in its text, or a water normal monster in defense position, but destroy it during the end of the battle phase. Now that seems kind of niche, but what's cool about this is the fact that you can special summon your Kairyu from your hand or graveyard during the battle phase, and then once it hits the board, because you control Umi, because this is treated as such, your opponent's forced to send everything they control except for one non-water. So that's obviously really, really cracked, and it comes up a lot, and people tend to overlook it. And that's it for the spells, guys. Now we're going to dive into the traps. Triple copies of Ice Barrier. Keep in mind, the general Wayne of the Ice Barrier that we main deck can search this card upon its normal or special summon. For those of you who don't know what this card is, insane generic trap card. It says, when an attack is declared involving your opponent's monster. So whether you're the one attacking or they're attacking you, and it could even be if they're attacking you directly, this can still trigger. You change that opponent's monster's attack to 0. Negate its effects, and it cannot change its battle position. That is a permanent effect negation and attack reduction, and it just makes their monster, it doesn't even target for that either. Keep in mind, it's a non-target negation and attack reduction that's permanent while that card remains in the field. And it's not once per turn for the first effect. So if you have multiple Ice Berries, you can activate them. The only condition is that your opponent, or not even your opponent, just an attack has to be declared. So whether that's on your side or theirs, you can Ice Barrier literally almost anything, which is nuts. And then if that wasn't bad enough, this card gives you really good additional benefit from the graveyard, where you can banish it from the grave to Foolish Burial a level 5 or higher water monster from your deck to the graveyard. And then if you do, you can add a water monster from your graveyard to your hand. Keep in mind, it can even add to hand the card that you just dumped off of the first part of the effect. Because it's and if you do clause, which is really, really sick. So this becomes a Rhoda for like certain high-level stuff, like your Mega Fortress Whale, your General Wayne, or your Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyu, which is really strong. So I can't like downplay this. Like, Ice Barriers are good, like really, really good. Then we're on the double copies of Torrential, because again, why not nuke the opponent's board and just force them to play very awkwardly? Torrential still puts in work after all these years. Then we're on 2 copies of Kairyu-Shin's Dark Reef. This is one of the newer Umi support cards that came out of the Legendary Duelist set. This card, at first I thought it was just okay. After playtesting and reading it and seeing how it works, this card's nuts. The only reason why we don't play 3 of it is just because we can search this through our Ocean Dragon Lord Kairyu-Shin, so we felt that playing 3 just was kind of overkill. But what this card does is you send a face-up Umi you control to graveyard as cost, and then you can special summon up to 2 monsters with different names from your hand and or deck that mention Umi or are water normal monsters in defense position. Then if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon an additional level 6 or lower water monster from your hand or deck. So pretty much what this card does is think of it like an emergency teleport for any card that mentions Umi in the text, but it can summon up to 2 cards from deck. So it's just an e-tele for any 2 like water monsters that mention Umi. And what's nuts about this is this can summon the Kairyu-Shin from deck. And it's just a very strong card. Keep in mind you are locked into waters until the end of the next turn, but again, that doesn't bother us because almost everything we play happens to be a water monster. And then for the last card to round out the main deck, again, main deck is 41 cards, double copies of Sea Stealth Attack. This trap card is very, very strong. Continuous Trap. When this card is activated, you can activate an Umi from your hand or your graveyard. So even if your opponent thinks they're going to clear your field spell, this card can actually activate it upon its activation from your graveyard, which is nuts. Then while Umi's on the field, this card gains the following effects. Once per turn, you can banish a water monster you control as cost until the end phase. And then face-up spells and traps you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, even if this card leaves the field. So just having a way to protect like your Legendary Ocean and all of your other face-up back row is nuts. And all you have to do is banish a water monster you control until the end phase. So even the card you banished isn't even permanent, it comes back. Then, as an additional effect, at the start of the damage step, if your water monster, whose original level is 5 or higher, battles an opponent's monster, you just destroy that opponent's monster at the start of the damage step. So this literally makes all of your cards, it turns them into El Shaddai constructs, pretty much. which just makes it so that your opponent can never attack them. Because if they try, this triggers and it just destroys their monster at the start of damage step. So 2 copies of Sea Stealth Attack, very, very strong. So that's going to round out the main deck, guys. Again, we're at 41 cards. Now we're going to jump into the extra deck. Double copies are totally awesome. Really cool card just because you're able to summon it off of cards like Bahamut Shark, and getting a free Omni Negate is just oh so good. A shout out to Mavens for printing Ultra Rare Toads. Needed a reprint for a while. Then around 2 copies of number 47 Nightmare Shark. This card is really cool because this can detach a material and target any water monster on the field, including itself. And this turn, that monster can attack your opponent directly. You're probably wondering why there's value in that. And the reason being is because this card helps enable Divine Arsenal Zeus, which you are extra decking, which is pretty cool. And before we go even further into the extra deck, a lot of the cards, if you notice, we're going to be playing 2 ofs. Reason for that is because we do play Pot of Extravagance, and we just want to add duplicates of stuff in the extra deck. That way, in case we banish one off of a pot, we still have a second copy in the extra deck that we can go into if we need to. 2 copies of Bahamut Shark, again, very, very strong. Keep in mind, UMI does dumb the levels down of all waters by 1, so our 5s become 4s, and our 4s become 3s. So just something to keep in mind when you're trying to make Xyz plays in this deck, but overall it doesn't bother us all that much. 2 copies of number 4 Stealth Kraken, very good generic rank 4 water Xyz, just for helping break your opponent's board for going second, very, very strong. Then of course 2 copies of Divine Arsenal Zeus himself. Again, we have a very easy line into this off of cards like Nightmare Shark, and Zeus is obviously just Zeus. Just make sure you're not locked into waters when you try and go into this. Then around double Mistar Boy, just as a generic Link 2 for waters, and 2 copies of Iria the Water Charmer. 2 very good generic Water Link 2 monsters. Can't complain about either of those cards. Mistar Boy giving you that recursion when it dies, and Iria the Water Charmer not only being able to steal cards out of their graveyard, but also floating upon her destruction as well. And then for the last card in the extra deck to round out the 15-card extra deck, we are playing the 1 World Sea Dragon Zelantis. Brand new out of Darkwing Blast. This card is absolutely nuts. Basically, when this card gets summoned, you can banish all monsters on the field, and then you get to special summon as many monsters as possible that were banished by this card's effect back to their owner's fields in either face up, or in face down defense position. Now, there's a lot of ruling questions about this card because this card can summon monsters in face up attack, even though it doesn't explicitly state that. The reason why it's worded that way is because of a weird OCG translation, but I did look up a ruling on this. This card is able to summon back Lynx, for example. It doesn't have to be in face up defense or face down defense. It can also be in face up attack, despite it not explicitly stating so. Again, I did look up a ruling. So if you guys have problems with it, just again confirm the ruling. You are able to summon Link monsters with this effect because you get to pick the positions the cards come back in. Something I failed to mention though is that this deck happens to waterlock you a lot of the time. Since it does that and you are the one conducting the summon, if you are waterlocked off of your own card effects, you can only summon the cards you're legally able to, meaning that you're only going to be able to summon your water. So if your opponent's not on a water strategy and every card you banish is an earth, for example, none of their stuff is getting resummoned because you legally can't summon it. So you just banished all their whole board for free, pretty much. So the 1 Zelantis is just really hilarious. And then, so that rounds out the extra deck, and then we'll jump into the side deck briefly. Side deck is a bit of a work in progress, but I think for the most part, a lot of the things are going to stick around. For example, the triple copies of Dogoran, the Mad Flame Kaiju. I think Kaijus are going to be invaluable, especially moving into the upcoming Cash Tira format. We're going to need Kaijus all day long. So stock up on them bad boys, because trying to stop the Cash Tira Shangri era is going to be your #1 priority come next format. Then, of course, because we hate back row decks, triple Cyclone, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. I'd rather banish the cards than destroy them, since so many spells and traps nowadays seem to do something when destroyed. So that pretty much explains that for the side. Then we're on double copies of Chalice, just as an additional negate if we need to side into it. Helps us for going second as well. So pretty good there. Then, this is a bit of a flex spot, I'll be honest, but just kind of keeping with the theme, we are siding triple copies of Drowning Mirror Force. This is just absolutely hilarious. If your opponent plays into it, they pretty much lost the duel, because it just shuffles all monsters they control back into the deck, which is nuts. And then for the last card to round out the side, triple Gozen Match. This actually puts in more work than you think, because everything we play for the most part is waters. But your opponent doesn't necessarily play only one attribute. I'm thinking of decks like Tear Element, which play both waters and darks. I'm thinking decks like Sprite, which play fires and darks. There's probably a few, like Kashtira, for example. Good example. Kashtira, upcoming format. All the Kashtira cards are different attributes. You have Unicorn, it's a wind, Ogre's a water, Fenrir's an earth. So cards that goes in match are going to floodgate the living hell out of your opponent from overextending. So, very, very cool card, especially when you know you're going first. But that's going to round out the updated UMI Control profile, guys. Leave a like down below and comment on the video what you thought of the profile. And stay tuned for more awesome content. I want to apologize because I know I haven't uploaded anything recently. That's only because I've really been busy with work and other activities that have been going on. But rest assured, I've been hard at work on deck profiles. I've been testing on Edo Pro and doing all kinds of cool stuff. I will be bringing my updated Metaphys profile to the channel, hopefully sometime this coming week. So stay tuned for that. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much. And subscribe if you haven't. Please help me. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs, and I can't do it with without your guys' help. So with that being said, take it easy, and until we meet again.